Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Orkify Everything with your host, Boss Mech Billy Bob. And today I'm here to tell you about sort of what you need in order to start building in this hobby. I realized that after my Boss Mech Bunker video, some people don't always know what they need in order to get started. So, what I have here is very, very basic. Before you even are sure that you want to get into this hobby extensively, what you need is some sort of X-Acto knife or scalpel, some sort of thing in order to cut plastic or resin or metal, just to get your stuff built. Now, depending on what you're using in terms of materials, you're going to need either some sort of plastic cement or some sort of super glue. Plastic cement is used mainly for PVC plastic models such as Games Workshop, Mantic, Wargame Atlantic, that kind of stuff, where it's injectable plastic. For the super glue, it's mainly for sort of resin to resin, metal to metal, resin to metal, and resin or metal to plastic. Some people say that you should just buy solely super glue because it does basically everything. However, the liquid cement tends to do a better job just on plastic. I mean, that's what it's formulated for. But it's a more of a chemical bond versus a mechanical bond. So instead of having these two pieces held together by just something that's wedged in there and it's dried, it actually sort of melts them together and makes the bond a little stronger. Now, once you're finally sure you want to be getting into this hobby regularly, I suggest getting a tray for your tools. It just so happens that I have the Battle Foam tray, which I bought at Mythico Studios back when it was in Sakasana, but now it's in Randolph and Mawa. So this is basically just it's a generally cut tray that's meant for the hobby tools that you may use. And I like to keep everything sort of together because when I start cutting, gluing, I kind of just get everything everywhere. And this is just sort of like, everything needs a home. So that way you know where it is when you need it. This. So the next thing you should buy is some sort of flush cutter or clipper. Now, I have these 4 types here. I don't always use them. My main workhorse right now are these 2. But in terms of why I have 4, it's because there are various materials that I use in order to build models. So this is more of a floral wire cutter, and it's more heavy duty. As you can see, the blades are more reinforced, and you don't have to really worry about cutting something that's too hard with it because it's a pretty chunky piece. It's not meant for any sort of dexterity or, finesse. It's just a chopper, essentially. This is for like large pieces of metal flash, or paper clips when you pin, that kind of stuff. This one I actually got from Harbor Freight. It's another set of flush cutters, but I tend to use it more for metals like brass, the sort of etching stuff, the detailing stuff that some kits have. This is for basically chopping into plastic, bigger chunks of plastic, because I don't want to wear out my fine clippers on something that tends to be a large, chunky piece of plastic. And these are the finest clippers that I own. They are meant to get us kind of sort of get in there into various fine areas and be very precise in the way they clip, because sometimes when you clip something with, a very imprecise thing, it'll leave a sort of a nubbin that you do have to go back and clean up eventually. Now, if you're going to be working with more resin, metals, you're going to want to invest in what's called a razor saw. So a razor saw basically is just a really, really fine saw that you use in order to cut things. It's not easy really to always work with resin or metal. However, this is the best way to basically get a straight line without gouging your materials. And also, if you're going to be using resin regularly, I suggest getting some sort of face mask. This is a little bit overkill because I also use this for spraying. But anything that can keep out any sort of volatile organics is best for that. However, just more simple masks that we now find because of the whole COVID outbreak thing, they'll tend to serve you just as well. Just don't get too crazy with them, and always make sure that when you remove the mask that you don't disturb too much of the particulates that are on it, because resin's carcinogenic, and if you inhale it enough, you will have problems. So I always keep a small ruler with me. So a small metal ruler, just in case I need it for making a straight edge or any sort of measurement, scoring if I'm working on with plastic card or any sort of flat material. This is the best way to basically make a straight line. I mean, it's a ruler. This is something that people really don't see a use for. However, I find it very helpful. So this is a seam scraper. This is specifically the one put out by Warlord Games. However, it's clearly just something that is sold by Warlord but is made by someone else. Kind of like some other things that GW used to do back in the day. So the entire idea of this is, instead of using the flat edge of your X-Acto knife, such as right in this area here, so see all this, people tend to take the model and just kind of scrape at it in order to get any of the area where the mold meets and some of the plastic material does leak into it. With this, however, instead of worrying about taking too much off, because sometimes with this blade you can get a little aggressive and actually make a flat spot, this is a little bit easier on the plastic, especially if you have curved plastic like in this nook here. I deal with a lot of orc choppas, and they always have that seam that's right down the middle of them. So instead of just scraping that one place flat and then having sort of a circle with a flat edge, this scrapes it evenly so that way it's more round. For less than $10, I absolutely think that you should get one, especially if you're dealing with a lot of round bits. And even if you're dealing with plastic and you glue it together with PVC plastic glue, it may not always line up properly, such as some Tau guns, and you just go over it a couple times with the sort of the crook of this area here, and it'll be flush. This is probably one of the oldest tools I have here. It's a pin vise that Games Workshop used to put out, which is now put out, I think, by Warlord, so it's clearly some other company that they just sell their stuff to. So, pin vise, and these are pins. They're basically just small drill bits, and basically they're for pinning, which is basically putting two pieces of either metal or resin, because really you don't need it in plastic unless you need to reinforce something, but you just sort of anchor it with a piece of paper clip or brass rod in order to make sure that when those two pieces are together, they won't easily come apart. Now, I went with Dremel drill bits because they do actually have specified widths on them, so that way you can get something that is similar in size in order to pin with. Also, it's easier to replace these than it is to just go and find a small little thing of drill bits. Super simple, super quick. And finally, more blades, and you always carry the blades in some sort of container because otherwise they're going to go everywhere. I had a massive issue when I was in architecture school, and they sold it in a small sort of paper pack with plastic wrap in it and an oil-filled piece of like parchment. And one day the paper pack just decided to fail, and they basically had an X-Acto knife landmine in my drawer. So from now on, I use tubes or some sort of thing that will hold them that isn't made of paper. So hopefully that helps in terms of what you may need in order to get started and then further on in this hobby. And I hope that you have fun doing it. Until then, take care.